All right, so we got this all set up and textured. We're ready to export this out and take a look at this inside of Maya. So what's really great about Substance Painter is it's very easy to export from. You just come up here to File, Export Textures, and when it comes into games in particular, this is where this program excels. All of the various game engines these days, they utilize different types of packing. And packing is how textures are basically put together to make it easier to rebuild them inside of engine and to optimize their use of data. So for example, any sort of image, we end up with a handful of different channels for. So for example, all images are going to contain a red, a green, a blue channel, and then depending on the format, an alpha. And most things have a direct mapping. So for example, the red, green, blue here, the 3 inputs, this is going to be for things like color. It's going to be things for like the normal map. But when it comes to things like the metalness and the roughness, well, those are single channels, meaning that we could just use the red for one, or the green for one, and even ambient occlusion. We could use one of these for one, and the alpha for an entirely different one. And that's the idea of packing, is instead of having, a dozen textures for each of these, it's going to kind of combine them down. Now, depending on what game engine you're going for, you have different export settings here. So if we come in here to the output template, you can pick through these. If you scroll down, you'll see all sorts of game engines in here. The common ones here are going to be things like the Unreal Engine, and you'll see Unreal Engine Packed. That's an option here. And then we also have the Unity game engine. Now, the demos I do tend to be in Unity. That's my go-to software. That's the one I've worked in the most professionally, and it's the most widely used in the industry currently as I'm making this. So what I'm going to look for here is going to be the Unity Universal Render Pipeline, Metallic Standard, and I'm going to export to that setting. But whatever game engine you're working in, look into their materials, export into it, and what's cool is Substance Painter is going to have that set up for you. You'll be good to go. Now, in terms of the output type, I'm just going to leave this at the size we're at, but you could say the size you want it to be down here. So right now it's texture size. I'll go ahead and kick out two 2048 textures. We can set the dilation to infinite. And then for the format, the common formats we tend to use in games are going to be PNG and Targa. Targa is the most broadly used across the industry. So generally, it's good to get into the habit of working in those. But I have worked with PNGs in the mobile industry. They are lower on data, and in my opinion, in some cases, more optimal. But we'll go ahead and export these as Targas, since that's the more common. So once we have that set, we can set an output directory here. And I'm going to set that to my character folder. So we can just come over here to our game character, source images, hero. And in the texturing here, I'll just create a new folder called exports. We can select that folder, and then we can go ahead and click export. And this will go ahead and export out our textures. Notice it's exporting them for the axe and for the hero. So with that set up, I'll hit save, and we can go ahead and check these out in the file. All right, so if I navigate to my source images here, we can look at hero, texturing, and we can see our exports here. So we're going to have hero low, and we're going to have our axe set up here. So interestingly enough, I am just seeing the hero here, and the reason why is I'm not reading it very well. So usually we want to rename these. For example, this is the hero axe, albedo transparency. For the color, we'll often just leave the name, or we'll do _color. And the naming conventions are going to be different everywhere you go. Then we might have axe metalness, and then we'll have axe normal. But these are pretty standard. And then here we would have our hero color. Here we'd have our hero metalness, and then here we would have our hero normal. So I am going to rename those just so they're good to go. And it never hurts to also double check them. You can double click to open this in Photoshop and just double check that there's no issues with it. You don't necessarily need to, but it never hurts. Sometimes there can be some weirdness, but these look pretty good. I don't think we'll have any issues with them. So now that we have that set, we're ready to hop over here into Maya and basically set up our final game scene. So what I have open is our high and low pass. I can delete out the high pass now. We have no longer any use for these. And we can start to recombine our character if we made alterations to it. So if you remember, a lot of these pieces I actually had interconnected. Some are standalone, like the pants, but the arms here were actually interconnected originally. So this is where you could come back in here and do something like a mesh combine. come into the vertices here, just highlight these and do an edit mesh merge to merge those vertices back together with a low threshold. I'll just click smooth to make sure that went. And hopefully it didn't cause any other issues. That should be fine. And I think those were the only parts we separated. I think everything else was kind of together, and we can combine it all again later, but that'll be good for now. Delete our history, and we can go ahead and assign some materials here. So I have a material for the character, I have a material for the axe. Now I want to give a full disclaimer here. I have not worked with the new material they have inside of Maya now, so hopefully things connect correctly. But they did add a new material here. So if you go ahead and assign, and you go to assign a favorite material, there's this new open PBR surface material that is supposedly to be a bridge between Maya and Substance Painter. If we go ahead and open that up, we can assign this. And it acts very much like a standard surface material. We can go ahead and name this. So I would make this my hero_material. And then we can adjust our inputs. So for example, in the color here, I'll just go to File. We'll go ahead and input our color. Navigate to our hero, texturing, exports, and find the hero color. And then just hit 6 to make sure it maps correctly here. And we can see our color being applied to our character. We can then come into the next category here, which for me is actually going to be down here under geometry. It's going to be bump mapping. I'm just going to click the input for that for File. We're going to swap this to tangent space normals, hit the over arrow, go into our file here, navigate to our hero, texturing, exports, and normal map. Make sure you set the color space here from sRGB to utility raw, and then we can see that applied here. So that's looking pretty good. And then lastly, we need to get in our metalness, which is also going to be our roughness map. So if I come into here now, you'll see under the specular, we have a color input. So this is where things get kind of interesting. We don't have a specular color here. You just have a roughness and a metalness. So we have to think about how we're going to input this. Now, in order to do that, you need to understand how Unity packs these. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And this is going to be different with every file. So in one channel here, we're going to have color information, but if you come over to the channels here, you're going to have an alpha. So the color information, when Unity packs this, is actually the metalness map, and then the alpha is going to be the roughness. Maya doesn't understand this, so in theory, if we connect our file here into metalness, and we go ahead and link this in to our hero, you would think this might get it right, but it absolutely does not. This is what we get. And it doesn't quite look bad, but it also doesn't quite look correct. So what is going on there? Let's go ahead and open up Hypershade here. And you'll see I have all sorts of different materials in here. If I do a quick file optimize scene size, this will clear this out. And we can go ahead and map out the hero material. So what's happening with the metalness here is that it's going to take the out alpha and plug this into the base metal. And we actually want to have the out color going to the base metal and the out alpha going into the roughness. The reason why it does this is because this is a single channel input and it can't input the color. So whenever you're working with the Unity textures in Maya, there's a couple things you need to do. One is you need to create a luminance node. I'm doing that by hitting tab, typing lum for luminance, and then you can take the out color, plug it into the luminance. And what that does is it takes the RGB data, switches it to a single channel grayscale, and then you can pipe that into the base metallic. And now we'll have our metals mapped correctly where they need to go. However, we don't have the roughness correct. So with the roughness, you can take the out alpha and you can plug that into specular roughness. But if we do that, you might notice we have a problem. And that's that the body looks really glossy and our metals look really matte. The reason why is the type of workflow Unity uses. Maya uses a specular roughness workflow, whereas Unity uses a specular gloss workflow. Now, what's the situation there? It means that gloss is the opposite of roughness, meaning that we need to invert our actual roughness map in Maya to preview it correctly. This will all plug into Unity just fine, but in terms of Maya, we do need to come in here and hit tab, type reverse to get a reverse node, And we just want to take the out alpha, plug it into the XYZ input here, and then just like we did with color, come in here with a luminance and go ahead and connect the output to the value of the luminance, and then plug that into the specular roughness. And this should give us the correct look in terms of what our character is going to look like. I am noticing these areas might be a little bit problematic. You can see how those are kind of grouping up there. Those are areas we might end up ultimately reducing, and really kind of depends on how those are going to look in Game Engine. But that's going to give our character a nice little setup here. And if you wanted to, you could go ahead and introduce something like a skydome light here. You could click on the light here, and you can see how this is interacting. Now, what would be even better is to pipe in something like an IBL into here, an image-based light. A great place to get those currently is Polyhaven. You can go to polyhaven.com. You can come in here to the assets. You can find HDRIs, and you can find a bunch of really cool ones that we could utilize. So we could look for something that's kind of like a dungeon. I don't know if that will come up with a dungeon. We can come in here to interior, and we could look up different types of interiors, and we could find one that might have the lighting of a dungeon. Something like this is kind of cool. We can click on this, and we can go ahead and download this. And once we have that downloaded, we can go ahead and input it into our maps, and we could map this into our light here. So I'm going to open up this here. My source images, I'll just create a new folder here called IBL. And it's always good to have these to preview. I have a whole bunch on my computer. I'm going to take my IBL I just downloaded, drag it into here, and then inside of Maya, in the skydome light, you can just come into the color here, you can input file, and then you can go ahead and navigate to the IBL, and you can plug that in. And now we're going to have a beautiful preview of our character in here. That's going to be similar to how it might look in something like the Game Engine. So this will give us an idea of how it's going to interact. So it is a little bit more realistic than I probably would have aimed for, and some of the areas might need some adjusting in terms of glossiness, but overall I'm pretty happy with it. These areas here in particular, I'm not terribly fond of. I didn't notice them in here so much, so it might be one of those circumstances where they don't really show up in Game Engine, and that's something to be aware of, is how Maya interprets things might be differently than how the Game Engine will. But we also do have the ability to come in here and use something like the target weld to weld these, and you can see welding these might fix the issue as well. But we'll have to explore that and figure that out as we progress forward. So sometimes things don't match one-to-one. Now, we can go ahead and get the axe set up the same way. We could go ahead and just assign a new favorite here. Go ahead and get the open PBR surface here. That should bring us up to the attribute editor. And in here, we'll just name this our axe_material. And we can just proceed to plug things in the exact same way. So we'll come into the file here. And this time I'll be navigating over into my axe textures. So we'll just grab our axe color, hit open, and then go ahead and come down here to the geometry. I do the geometry second because we don't have to do the additional setup inside of Hypershade. Just remember with the axe normals, you do need to come in here and set this from color space sRGB to utility raw, unless you've set it up to not need to do that. But that looks good. You know, it looks like our axe blade is looking great there. So awesome. That's going to work out well. And then just coming over here, I'll map out the axe material. And since we already know we need to make these particular adjustments to these things, I'll just create a custom node tree in here very quickly. We can hit tab to bring up a file. Go ahead and navigate down to texture, hit enter. On this, we can go ahead and navigate to our hero. We can get into our texturing exports and axe metalness. Then we can go ahead and take a luminance here from the color. So we'll take the out color here into the luminance value and then plug that into the base metalness. And then we could come in with a reverse, take the out alpha into the reverse here, and then take this into a luminance. You might also be able to make these adjustments inside of the node itself. I like to keep everything external, as you can see. So yeah, there we go. But that will get our axe set up in here with our characters. So now we have a nice little texture set up. We can see how these are interacting. We're basically ready to prep this for rigging once we confirm everything's looking halfway decent. So what I will do at this point is consider if I want to keep the light in here or not. I could always delete it, and we can bring it back in if we want it. But I would say everything's looking pretty good. I don't see any major issues. Our textures turned out decently. At this point, you might need to go back and try and troubleshoot things like these. But I think we could take a look at these in Unity as well and just make sure there's no issues there. So let's go ahead and launch up Unity here, or whatever game engine you want to preview yours in, and just make sure that it's good to go and you're not going to have any issues. Before we do, though, it can be a good idea to kind of combine these the way we're going to combine them. So when you do have a game asset, a final game asset, you actually are going to take everything that the game asset has attached to it and do a mesh combine to turn it into a single draw call. And just delete the history on it, freeze the transforms, and then we can go ahead and name this, hero underscore polygon for now. And we'll go ahead and save this out. So I'll go ahead and just do a file save scene as. We have a lot of files here. Sometimes I like to break this out, and I'll just go ahead and name this our game character. And we could just go ahead and put this in here and just put this as our hero final 01. We still have a handful of things we need to do for this, so I do want to emphasize we will be coming back in here and editing this, but that's going to give us a setup here. I'm going to go ahead and launch Unity and have a project set up. We don't need to have a whole game set up for this, so I'm just going to open up an existing project that I have going. That way I don't need to create a new one and take up space on my desktop. But I encourage you to have a project per game that you test in. So it is going to take a moment here for Unity to launch up. It takes quite a while to get started from just kind of a base here. But I do usually have a Unity project per game for testing in. I may even have this within my Maya directory. And it uses whatever render settings the game has. That's basically the goal. All right, now with that said, we do need to export this so we can set it up in-game. The easiest way to do that is to come up here to File, come in here to our game exporter, and we can go ahead and click this button here. Basically, we just want the defaults here. Everything's fine under the model here. You can select a directory here, and then we can go ahead and output this somewhere. Now, it depends on where you want to put this. I'm actually going to put this in the source images, hero texture, export here, and we're just going to choose this location, and I'm just going to make this my hero texture check and export that as an FBX. So once that is exported, and once our game engine is launched and ready to go, we can bring our character into it and just see how it's looking in game engine and make sure it doesn't have any issues. So I'm going to let Unity finish launching, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so I've gone ahead and launched Unity here, and we can go ahead and just bring in our assets here. I'm going to create a new folder down here in the directory, and we'll just go ahead and make this our character preview. So to preview the character in Unity, what we'll do is navigate to the file we have all of our textures in, come in here to our exports, and I'm just going to bring in all the textures first, so just drag and drop those into here. And then what we can do next is we can go ahead and drop in our hero character afterwards. Now, if the materials we're using are identifiable by Unity, it will go ahead and hook everything up. Unfortunately, these new advanced Maya materials haven't been, so there's a good chance it won't, and we'll need to manually hook things up, which is the case here. Now you notice it has an option here, material is using a texture as normal map, so it has navigated that it is using these textures. So we can click fix now, and it will go ahead and fix those. And if we just drag and drop our hero into the scene and hit the F key to frame up on it, we should see the character at least with the normal map applied. And you can see how that looks here. Now, it does look like this area may still be a problem, so that is unfortunate. We will have to kind of adjust the topology there and figure out how we can finesse that to not be a problem. But let's go ahead and take a look at our materials here. If we go and expand this out, we can right-click here, and we can go ahead and extract from prefab to extract this out. Just select the same folder here. We can do the same thing for the second one, extract from prefab, extract this out. And then we can hook up our various materials. So this is the hero. We'll just go ahead and map in the color here. And then we'll just go ahead and map in the metallic. And you'll see that's how our character looks, which is pretty good. Like I mentioned, we have that little issue, so we're going to have to figure out a solution for that, if it's in the normal or if it's elsewhere. And then we can do the same for the axe. We can come in and we can plug in the axe color, and we can plug in the axe metallic, and we can see how this looks. So all of this is looking really great, I would say, minus that minor area there. Also, the axe blade itself, it's kind of interesting how that seems to be falling off there and not quite giving me what I'm looking for. So that could be potentially an issue with normals as well. So let's take a look at these and just kind of assess if we can make any adjustments to these. The first thing I would do is come in here and open up something like the hero normal, just to make sure it's not an issue with the normal map that I'm facing. And we can find our way to the head. And if I take a look at the head, it actually is. You can see these crease lines are a part of the normal map here and do appear here. So those could be part of the issue. And that is the front head. So very interesting in terms of how that's looking. That could be a situation where a hard edge was needed, but we just did not detect it. I could also come in here to something like the axe normal, and we could double check things like the blade. So this, once again, is also an indication of an area where a hard edge was likely needed. So it's very strange that, this didn't get picked up in here in terms of how this, is set up. So what are our options? We actually have a handful of options at this moment. We could either manually edit our normals in Photoshop to see if we can correct these, and that's the map information. Or we could manually edit our characters' normals and rebake from Substance here, which is also kind of interesting. These areas, as you can see, there's really no indication they're problematic in here. And this is one of the annoying aspects of working across so many programs. When I zoom out, though, you can kind of see an indication there. As far as the axe concerned, though, there's never an indication here that these are problematic. So very interesting that we are running into these issues, but I'm also glad we are, so we can talk about possible solutions. The first is the least offensive, which is making the adjustments externally. So inside of Photoshop, for example, if for the most part this is looking fine on the head normal, and we just need to make some minor adjustments here, I can add a layer and we can zoom into these areas that are problematic right here. And we could use something like the spot heal brush to just heal out these areas and remove the problematic sections. This may not work, though, because I am noticing it looks a bit concave, and that concavity to an extent might be an indication of something more problematic, with that being the normals needing to be baked from a hard edge and not a soft edge. Now, I do want to be careful here that I don't remove any important information, but something like this may be enough to save this without needing the adjustment. So I'm going to try this out real quick. We can go ahead and do a save a copy. And if we want to save this out as a new copy, we'll just go ahead and name this test. So that way we can test this in place of that. And I'll just hit OK. Then inside of here, we can go ahead and bring in our normal test, drag and drop this into here. And in the hero material, we can plug this into the normal map. Now you'll see we need to fix this, so we can click Fix Now, and we can see if that fixed the issue. And it didn't. So what that indicates to me is we're probably going to need to do another bake anyway, so we might as well give that a shot. Before we do, though, we could also test the axe. The axe would be pretty simple, and we might even be able to tell it inside of Maya. For example, if I come in and do a Skydome light here, we can plug in our Skydome light under the file and bring back in our IBL. What would essentially work here is coming into this and taking this edge here, double-clicking it, doing the same over here, and just doing a mesh display harden edge and seeing if this fixes it or not. So just make sure you have all the edge you need there, mesh display harden edge, and see if that does the fix. In this instance, it doesn't. I'm curious how it would look in this game engine. Usually Maya and Unity are pretty close to 1-to-1, so that's not going to be a simple fix there either. We could, however, try baking it again with a hard edge. Maybe there was a different thing that was causing the issue. I was fairly certain it was the hard edge last time, but you never know. So harden edge, and we could try re-exporting this. I could also do that there with those too, but hey, let's take a look. delete the history here, go ahead and do another game export. So we'll just game export this over the top. And one of the things that's kind of nice is you can drag and drop in Unity, or you can delete and swap out. So for example, I'll leave this zoomed into the axe, but if I go ahead and delete this mesh here in the assets, this will actually delete it from the engine, but notice this is still here looking for this file. If you drag and drop this into the same location, it will refresh over that. Now we can already see there's a problem there, so that's not going to be the fix for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about troubleshooting these next, but hopefully that gives you an idea of why it's very important to kind of preview things in Game Engine and why Substance Painter tends to be a liar. So just kind of be aware, what you see in Maya generally is more accurate than what you see in Substance Painter in terms of what's going to be going into the Game Engine. So let's go ahead and take a look at some troubleshooting options next, so we can see about how we can do this inside of Substance Painter and some nice techniques we can use to get some different results. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next video in the series when it goes live.